Okay, so diving into the Mazatlan real estate market, huh? And you found this guide by a local realtor, Francisco Javier Lopez Alvarez.
Sounds like you're taking this seriously.
Well, yeah, gotta do your homework. Right. So we're making this deep dive, our own little cheat sheet to Francisco's world, you know?
It's definitely more than just scrolling through listings. This Francisco, he's got a whole philosophy about finding the right fit.
He's not just about closing deals then.
Not at all. He talks about, like, really getting to know people, like what they actually want out of life in Mazatlan, not just, what they think they want on paper.
Interesting. Is that common? In the Mazatlan market, I mean.
Hard to say for sure, but Francisco seems to believe that personal touch is, like, crucial. He even shares a story about finding the perfect spot for this retired American couple. And it wasn't just about the property itself. It was about finding that place where they felt like they belonged. Part of the community.
Okay, so really understanding their dreams, finding them a home, not just a house. What else is interesting about this Francisco guy?
Well, he's got a sense of humor about the whole thing.
That's always good. Real estate can be a bit.
Yeah, exactly. He even compares himself to, get this, a member of Les Luthiers.
Okay, now I have to ask. For those of us who don't have Argentinian comedy troupes on speed dial who are Les Luthiers.
They're known for this musical and theatrical humor. It's pretty unique. Not your average stand-up routine, that's for sure.
So Francisco's bringing some of that playful energy to real estate.
Seems like it.
I have to say, that's pretty refreshing, especially when you think about how overwhelming buying or selling can be.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder if that approach is especially effective in a market like Mazatlan.
Because it's attracting a lot of international buyers.
Exactly.
Because buying in a foreign country, I mean, that just adds a whole other layer of, well, everything.
Oh, for sure. Especially if you're not fluent or familiar with the legal system and all that.
Right, right. And speaking of language, Francisco is bilingual, right? Spanish and English.
He is, which is huge for those international buyers. It can be so daunting to deal with contracts and stuff in a language you're not 100% comfortable with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can hire a translator, sure, but
Right.
having an agent who really speaks your language, that's got to build a lot more trust.
Exactly. It suggests that Francisco is really catering to that growing international community in Mazatlan.
And he's been doing this for a while, right? Over 2 decades in real estate.
That's right, over 2 decades. So he's seen the market change and evolve.
2 decades, that's a good track record. He's not just some, what do they call him, fly-by-night realtor trying to make a quick buck.
Right. He seems really invested in Mazatlan.
Okay, so we've got this realtor who's got a sense of humor, understands the importance of community,
He speaks the language.
and has been in the game for a while. But his background, it's not just real estate, is it? He was a journalist.
And did some network marketing, too.
Okay, now that's an interesting mix. How do you think that plays into his real estate work?
Well, I mean, journalists, they're all about asking the right questions, right? Digging for information and then, crafting a story.
And networking is all about connections, understanding what makes people tick.
Exactly.
So maybe those skills help him connect with clients on a deeper level, find those properties that really align with their needs, and maybe even anticipate problems before they happen.
It's certainly possible. He's definitely bringing a unique perspective. More than just your average realtor, that's for sure.
So Francisco, he's obviously a fan of Mazatlan, right? But, I mean, he's selling the place. What's his pitch? Why should someone want to invest there?
Yeah, he definitely leans into the whole paradise thing. But he does back it up with some pretty interesting points about the city's development.
Okay, so actual reasons, not just the beaches and the margaritas.
Well, those don't hurt, but he really highlights the infrastructure,
Yeah.
Big investments happening right now. He talks about the airport expansion, those Malkin upgrades.
Okay, that's smart. A fancy new airport and a nice waterfront. Those aren't just cosmetic changes.
Exactly. I mean, those signal that a city is, prepping for growth.
Yeah.
They want to attract more people, especially from overseas. And, speaking of attracting an international crowd, he brings up the cost of living.
Still pretty affordable, especially compared to those other hot spots in Mexico.
Right, exactly.
Which is huge for, well, everybody really. But especially retirees, people thinking about working remotely, that whole thing.
Definitely. It's about finding that balance, right, between lifestyle and affordability.
Okay, but how does it actually compare, though? Are we talking significant savings, or is it just like the margaritas are $1 cheaper?
That's the thing. Francisco's guide, it paints a pretty picture. I mean, he is trying to sell us on Mazatlan. So it's always smart to double check, right? Look at those cost of living websites.
Yeah.
Numbeo, Expatista.
Get the real data.
Exactly. Get into the nitty-gritty. See how those day-to-day expenses actually shake out.
Okay, so cost of living, check. What about the whole, he mentions a thriving tourism industry, right?
He does, yeah.
Is that a good thing for real estate, or is it risky? I don't know. It seems like it could go either way.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because on the one hand, you've got potential, right? Tourism booming means more short-term rentals, more vacation properties, and that can be very, very lucrative,
So you could strike gold, basically, if you get in on that action.
potentially. But then there's the other side of that coin, right? If a city depends too much on tourism, well, that can be risky too. Because what happens if something disrupts travel?
Or if it just gets too popular, like prices out the locals and suddenly it loses that authentic feel.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot. Where tourism is a good thing, it contributes, but it doesn't overwhelm the place. And that's something Francisco actually seems pretty aware of, especially when he talks about finding those properties that fit in, not just plopping down some mega resort in the middle of a quiet neighborhood.
Okay, so we've got infrastructure, cost of living, tourism. What about the actual buying process? How scary is that for us non-Mexicans?
Right, like navigating a whole other country's legal system.
Yeah, exactly. And he does mention different types of properties, right? It's
Yeah.
not all just beachfront condos.
Oh, no, he mentions the whole range. Beachfront condos, gated communities, even stuff in the historic center.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then land for development, too. So it seems like, something for everyone, every budget.
That's good to know. But I'll be honest, the legal side of this is what makes me nervous.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as, signing on the dotted line back home. But Francisco does actually walk through it in his guide, I mean.
Is he really? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, he lists out those steps, starting with defining your needs, your budget, and then all the way through to due diligence and everything.
And working with lawyers, right? I'm assuming that's a big part of this.
Oh, yeah. Especially, he mentions a fideicomiso. Have you heard of that?
It rings a bell, but honestly, it sounds kind of scary.
It's basically this bank trust that allows foreigners to, legally own property
Okay.
because there are certain restricted zones in Mexico.
Like beachfront property, I'm guessing.
Exactly. So it's a way for foreigners to buy in those areas, while still complying with Mexican law.
So it's like a legal loophole, but like a good one, a safe one.
It's more of a workaround. But yeah, it gives you that security of ownership. Might seem complicated, but Francisco, he stresses that his team, they've got lawyers who specialize in this, so it doesn't have to be a nightmare.
Which goes back to his whole thing about finding humor in all of this, which honestly might be the best advice he gives.
Right. Real estate, it shouldn't be that scary.
Exactly. But even with the best lawyer and a good sense of humor, are there still things like red flags, things that maybe Francisco glosses over because he is, trying to sell us on this place?
Oh, for sure.
So red flags. For those of us who don't speak fluent Spanish, who've never bought property south of the border, what are we missing? What does Francisco maybe not tell us in his super sunny guide to paradise?
Well, he's definitely focused on the fun stuff, right? Finding that dream property.
Mm.
But buying in a foreign country, it's not just about the house, is it?
It's about the life you're buying into.
Exactly. And that part can get lost sometimes.
It's one thing to visit Mazatlan, fall in love with the beaches.
Oh, the food.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
living there day to day, that's a different story. Francisco talks about community, finding a place where you belong. But how realistic is that if you don't speak the language?
It's a good question. I mean, Mazatlan is getting more international, but there's still a big difference between vacationing somewhere and really putting down roots.
Right. Like ordering a coffee shouldn't require a translator app.
Exactly. And what about when things go wrong? Can you explain a plumbing problem to a local handyman? Navigate a trip to the municipio?
Okay, that's a good point. Due diligence isn't just about making sure the roof doesn't leak. It's about honestly assessing if you're ready for a different pace of life, a different way of doing things.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, having an agent who gets that, it's crucial. Someone who can level with you about the challenges, not just the perks.
And speaking of challenges, let's circle back to the legal stuff. The fideicomiso sounds like it solves the whole owning property as a foreigner thing, but are there other legal hoops to jump through, other things that could trip people up?
Even with the fideicomiso, there can be, hiccups, things to watch out for.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so say you find this amazing property,
Yeah.
right? Perfect location, great price. But then it turns out there's a dispute over the title. or some permit issue that never got fully resolved. Suddenly, you're not just signing paperwork, you're navigating a foreign legal system.
That sounds like a particular kind of nightmare.
It can be.
Yeah.
And that's why this is where having a good lawyer, it's not just a good idea, it's essential.
Which Francisco does emphasize that, right? Having a team you trust.
He does, yeah. He even mentions that his team includes lawyers who, they specialize in working with foreign buyers,
Yeah.
which is huge because they've seen it all, right? They know the ins and outs, the things that could potentially trip you up.
So, okay, we're coming to the end of this deep dive, and it seems like Francisco's guide, it's a good starting point, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It gives you a sense of the market, the different types of properties, the steps involved, but
But it's just one perspective.
and it's a
Roz.
very, let's say, optimistic one,
It's marketing. He's trying to paint Mazatlan in the best possible light.
which is fair. That's his job. But for anyone seriously considering this, you gotta go deeper. Do your own research. Look beyond those glossy brochures.
Talk to people who actually live there.
Huh.
Get those unfiltered stories, the good, the bad, and the lost in translation moments.
Because buying real estate, it's a big decision, anywhere, but especially in a foreign country. It's not just about finding a property you like, it's about finding a place where you can actually see yourself building a life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So there you have it, folks.
Huh.
Our deep dive into the world of Mazatlan real estate, guided by the one and only Francisco Javier Lopez Alvarez.
Or, as he might say, Le Luthier of real estate.
That's right. But as always, the real deep dive, that's up to you. Do your homework, ask the tough questions, and most importantly, figure out what you really want out of this next chapter.
Because finding your place in the world, that's a journey worth taking seriously. But hey, a little sense of humor along the way never hurts either.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, happy house hunting.